Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Carmen Majid. Thank you for joining me for this month's segment of Conversations with Carmen. Conversations with Carmen is a monthly venue where I have the opportunity to sit down with one of our provider spotlights and talk with them about their clinical areas of training and expertise. If you decide that you're curious about Provider Spotlight and Conversations with Carmen, feel free to reach out to Provider Relations directly at providerrelations@soultenders.com or myself at cmajid.ip@soultenders.com. Again, thank you for joining me and enjoy the interview.
Well, good morning, Claudia.
Good morning.
I am so thrilled to have you. Everyone, this is Claudia Reyes Guatemala, licensed marriage and family therapist. She is one of my esteemed colleagues here at Soul Tenders. And we are equally and collectively excited this morning. I know I am because we were just chatting about how this is, for me, this is my first experience being in the room in this kind of a setting in over 3 years, and I know it's been sort of intermittent for you as well. So I'm just delighted to have you, and I'm just really excited that you were selected for our March 2023 Provider Spotlight. So congratulations!
Oh, thank you. It's so great to be here, and it's such an honor to not only be selected, but also to have the experience to sit with you and chat with you in person.
So I guess my first question is, if you can talk to us a little bit about your journey with Soul Tenders, how it began, when it began, what that experience looked like.
Yeah, so my journey with Soul Tenders started in 2019. But I think that it's fair to talk about what happened before 2019, which I had already been working in community mental health for about a decade, which I think I did so many little things in community mental health, from doing direct clinical work with a client to then transitioning to leadership and doing program management and clinical supervision. And in that transition, which probably was the last almost 3 years of like my community mental health career, I just felt this urge to be with the client again. And even though I had the opportunity to, about roughly one time a month, I got to work with a group of parents. I remember that these one time a months created so much inspiration for me. And so I sought out in my own agency to see if I could dip my toe back into client work. And as community mental health goes, they have very specific pots of money. And there is no such thing as dipping your toe. And so then so when that opportunity wasn't available for me, I kind of sat back and said, okay, I'll wait it out a little bit. And as I waited it out, I realized, no, I really want to do this. And I went, I really want to do this, but I don't know that I'm fully ready to jump into private practice. And I decided to volunteer at Homeboy Industries. And in Homeboy's Industries, I was able to see a handful of clients. I did that for roughly 6 months. And I realized, I think I'm ready to go back to this. And then I think it was September, I know I have very close colleague friends who supported me in this journey, and supported me and held my hand through it, and I was able to come to Soul Tenders and start my private practice.
That's wonderful. It sounds like it was just serendipitous timing, and you being able to volunteer your time to Homeboy Industries was not only a blessing to them, I imagine. I'm sure they benefited in many ways, just your presence and everything that you probably brought to the situation, but for you as well. So it's almost like, not that you needed a refresher of sorts, but it might have felt like you hit a little bit of a reset button, and then it might have felt like over the course of those 6 months that any doubt, even if it was an inkling or a question mark or an uncertainty about, do I launch back into direct service? It was like, it sounds like it was probably like solidified. Like, this is the path. Boom, here we go. Let's go.
Like riding a bike.
Absolutely. Like you never, muscle memory. You never lose it. You may have to practice and, few hiccups here and there, but the skill set is there. It's innate, you know what I mean? How wonderful. I love it. And I'm curious, just quickly, what types of clients did you volunteer with at Homeboy Industries?
That's a good question, because Homeboy Industry in its nature mainly only works with adults.
Right.
And so it happened to be that I mainly got to work with adults, and I think that I think for a while I had already known that community mental health, a lot of the money goes to children, understandably so, right? And so I had the opportunity to work with a lot of kids, but I really, what I learned was, the work that I do really lies with the parent. And so, and they thought systems, right? Like if I work with the parent, then there is an automatic trickle down to the family system, which is going to impact the child.
Absolutely.
And so then working at Homeboy Industries was mainly adults, only adults actually. And I think that you're right. It's like very serendipitous, and I think you used the word, it's solidified. And I think it solidified a lot of things that I didn't know that I was feeling in the moment, but when I did them, I went, oh, that felt good.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's the stuff. I love that.
Yeah.
How wonderful. Well, and then 2019, you landed here, and you've not looked back.
Back.
I feel like we may have started around the same time, because this is my second journey with Soul Tenders. I don't know if I ever shared that with you, but I had initially jumped on board with Soul Tenders years before, shortly after Wendy had basically opened the doors, and then transitioned away, did some things, community mental health one basically, and then circled back in like September of 2019. All right, well, talk to me a little bit about where you're from. Where did you grow up?
Yeah, so actually, I'm originally from El Salvador, and I was born there, and at age 6, my family and I immigrated to the U.S., and we landed in L.A. And pretty much I grew up in L.A. I went to school in L.A. I went to Title IX schools, right? And was able to have an amazing array of teachers, an amazing array of teachers where, for me, I also came in as a ESL student, right? And so I remember having teachers. I have a sister, an older sister, that's a year and a half older than I am. And I remember having clear conversations with my parents where teachers were suggesting they're ready for English classes. Wow. And so that was quite the journey, right? To have that kind of memory where like they go, you're ready for the next step.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. And so and I did that. I stayed in LA my whole time, Highland Park. Okay. And eventually stayed around for undergrad and went to Cal State LA. Yep.
Wonderful school.
And then eventually went to Loma Linda. It was a drive away. I didn't live over there. Okay. But it was a very incredible education.
It's amazing. And for those of us who don't know, what is a Title IX school?
So a Title IX school is a school that is government funded. Okay. So essentially it has the programs to support low-income students.
Got it. Okay.
Low-income student and parents.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. It sounds like that was, as you reflect back on your journey, it sounds like, again, I don't want to overuse the word, but just that serendipitous timing, meaning like things, whether it was advantages that were presented to you, opportunities to further your development, further your identity, and here you are now. I think there's stepping stones. I just believe in stepping stones, and personal history, all facets of it is just incredibly significant and important and meaningful. Yeah. So,
completely.
Wow.
And I do believe that so much of that journey was stepping stones. Yeah.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Okay, so I'm going to refer to my little notes here for my next question, because when we spoke briefly the other day, you used or you referred to a concept that I found so intriguing. You referenced conceptualizing and working with clients from an intersectionality perspective. And I would love for you to elaborate on that.
Yeah. So, I think that the nature of therapy, and you and I can attest to a lot of the things that we learn in our doctorate program, our grad program, was Western Anglo vision, right? Lens.
Yes.
And what in the journey of not only working in the melting pot that is Los Angeles, but also growing up around brown, Black, Asian children, right? Going to school with the same adults.
Right.
The realization is how much of this lens has been curated for all populations, right? And so I think that a big part of what I do in my own private practice is do culture-centered therapy, which means that we invite the client's culture identity into the room and discuss how that is impacting all of the other, for example, mood disorders and everything else that that we are trained to do, right? And so I think that in building or in being able to introduce intersectionality into therapy, it means that, I think that folks who fall into an intersectional identity have learned to mold themselves to make other people feel comfortable.
Ah, yes. Okay.
And doing therapy in a space where a client gets to be 100% themselves, and we get to talk about their ethnicity, their culture, their gender identity, their sexuality, is so, to name a few, is so, their disabilities, right? It's so important to be able to have a full picture of what the client is, what are the blocks that are stacked against the client, right? Because there is always the societal expectation of, well, why don't you just do it? Right.
Absolutely.
And so we want to, in the space with the client, I want to be able to challenge those societal familial expectations and be able to connect with them with themselves and say, well, what are some of the tools that I came with? What are the tools that my culture came with? And how much of that hinders, right? And we got to talk about how, even though we embrace our culture, we can also talk about sometimes our culture can hinder our growth, but we can also talk about how our culture feeds our growth.
Right. Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it sounds like one of the goals is to establish a safe, inviting situation between you and client, whereby the client feels comfortable enough to convey themselves and to self-express unfiltered. And in order to get to that place, of course, Psychology 101, Therapy 101, we have to create that safe space. There has to be the rapport and the trust that's built. And what I absolutely love about your perspective on this is, I remember you shared with me a few days ago that in order to get that client to a place of feeling comfortable enough to speak unfiltered, you basically, and I use the term nicely, like you confront or you address the differences between the two of you from day one. So from Jump Street, you're talking about the obvious differences, and then eventually the not so obvious differences. And I love that.
Yeah.
So
and I think that I think that when we think about rapport, we think about how are we welcoming and inviting. Does my office look welcoming?
Absolutely.
But you're right. I think that being able to, for example, if you were my client, one of the first things that I would point out or have us discuss is the fact that you're a Black woman and I'm a Latina woman.
Absolutely.
Right? And though maybe there are similarities in our experiences, there are very stark differences in our experiences. And I think part of it is letting the client know that because of our power differential, the natural power differential that occurs, letting the client know that I am not an expert in them or in their culture.
Right.
And that they get to be the expert.
You're teachable.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I love that. Wonderful. All right, so I'm not sure if you're aware, but March is Women's History Month. So I'd love to throw a couple of questions at you in the spirit of the month. So who would you say are inspiring women in your life, either presently, historically, or both? And how have they impacted your journey?
Yeah, so Women's History Month, right? What a history.
I know, right?
But I'm very lucky, Carmen. I'm surrounded with very strong women in my life, and I mean I can sit here and list all of them, but I think that the part of why being surrounded by strong women has been so impactful for me has been because I'm surrounded by a lot of different women, right? Like immigrant women, first generation women, Spanish speaking women, women of color, queer women, trans women, and having an array of, I'm going back to this intersectionality piece, having strong women who have to work 2-3 times as hard is incredibly inspirational for me. And I gain a lot of my energy, a lot of my inspiration from a lot of these women, you know. But if we're going to talk specifics, as you know, I think about who are the original inspirations in my life, and you know, I'm lucky just to have my mom and my sister, and you know, I think that my mom and my sister are two women that show so much love and so much strength. You know, so much of that is a mix of also being immigrant women, right? Where how do we blend being strong and needing to be strong with also showing love, right? And sometimes they kind of stack over each other, and maybe sometimes the strength is the love, right?
Absolutely.
And you know, I think that in terms of like my career, I'm surrounded with a lot of colleagues, especially women colleagues, who have really opened up doors in this industry, have opened up doors for me. And I find so much inspiration even in my clients, right? Like to have the opportunity and be so humbled to listen to such challenging stories and still have, you know, women be lawyers, women be incredible mothers, you know, change, you know, really demolish generational trauma. I think that that's incredibly inspirational.
Absolutely. And I totally agree with you. And sometimes, I think a lot of times, with our clients specifically, we unassumingly and definitely unintentionally may make assumptions, and we may have preconceived notions about people. They come in and they're a little bit more quiet or a little bit more, again, unassuming. And then once you really start to peel away layers, not only do you get to experience who that client really is, but then you find, at least I find myself overwhelmed by so much that I didn't know, and things that I did know, but now they're being reinforced. And I glean so much strength from people and people's courage and tenacity and just zest for life. You know, and I end up feeling, even though it's not my therapy, but I end up feeling reinvigorated. And a lot of that energy comes from hearing about people's personal journeys, whether it's from a cultural perspective, a gender perspective, whatever the case may be. So there's just so much dynamic energy, you know, in the room, especially when you're dealing with strong women.
Exactly. And I think that's one of, you know, going back to really dismantling societal expectations, right? You know, the idea that having women walk into our room, right? Which, you know, there are more women than men in therapy.
Absolutely.
But even that, right? The societal expectation that women are the ones that are required to do the work.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
And so to allow women to be able to gain strength from that, and be able to acknowledge or learn in themselves that the change is for them. The growth is for them.
Right.
That, the moment that you are able to really turn on that light bulb,
absolutely,
it's magic in the room.
Oh, for sure, for sure. It's like a launching pad.
Yes.
And there's no looking back. Yeah, I love that. Well, Claudia, it has been such a pleasure sitting with you. And again, thank you for your time, for sharing your space with me. It was delightful, beyond delightful sitting here chatting with you this morning. So everyone, if you are curious about anything Claudia had to say, and if you'd like to follow up with her or have them follow up with you, what is the best email address for them to reach out to you?
So the best email address is creyes, REYES, .ip@soultenders.com.
Wonderful. And if anyone has questions for me or would like to follow up with me about any component of this interview, I can be reached at cmajied, MAJIED, .ip@soultenders.com. And if you have questions specifically for provider relations, either about just curiosity around the provider spotlight process, or if you'd like to be considered for a monthly provider spotlight selection, email providerrelations@soultenders.com. Again, thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Carmen.
All right,
I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Take care.